Well, hello everyone. I'm Wayne Golden, and this is the Global Net. We've got a little background noise. That is not a geese or anything. But I'm in a hotel in Lebanon, and I have here with me a missionary who has been in Lebanon for quite a while, and he has a work with refugees. And so Dennis is going to tell us about what God is doing among refugees and how prayer has been a very important part of his ministry. So Dennis, welcome to this podcast for the Global Net. And just share with us, just briefly, what God is doing and how prayer has been a part of that.
Okay. Yeah, well, it's a real pleasure. I've been sharing recently with many people that God is doing something in our day that we haven't seen here in the Middle East. There are the beginnings of small movements among Muslim peoples. And when we say movements, we don't just mean a few believers here, a church here or there, but dozens and dozens, and in some places over 1,000 house churches among Muslim background people. Mm-hmm. These are Muslim background believers. So 2 years ago, we kind of had wind of one or two or three of these. Uh-huh. Last year it was 6, 7, or 8, and this year we're starting to track almost 24 of these growing movements. Some of them are small, maybe 20 to 30 groups. Mm-hmm. Some of them are numbering, like I said, in the thousands. Wow. So that's a really exciting thing. Uh-huh. And this has never happened in the history of the Middle East to have this much movement. Yeah. So I was just asked today, so what was some of the prayer that went into that? And we really do believe that extraordinary prayer, prayer beyond what we're normally doing is part of what God uses. Yeah. Prayer is that way to get our sails up and start to listen for where His wind's coming, and then to go with that. Mm-hmm. Our journey toward extraordinary prayer started with just very little prayer. When we first came out to the Middle East 21 years ago, I had this inkling. I knew that we needed to be praying for things to move. When God's people pray, God moves. Yeah. But honestly, we found it hard to set aside good time to pray. Right. We started off with praying for 30 minutes at the end of our weekly team worship times, and that was a good start. Yeah. I was deeply impacted by what a teacher said, or in that first year. He said, the amount of time we invest in prayer reflects how much we really believe that God is in charge. Wow. And that's one of the most impacting words on prayer I'd heard at that early stage. And I really wanted to tell God, I know you're in charge. It's not up to us, it's up to you. Yeah. So we made a good start. It was one of the ladies on our team that said, let's just take time to pray for locals, pray for our home church. And we started doing that. In that process, we also heard about prayer walking. Just kind of taking time once a week, a part of a day, to go walk parts of our city and bless parts of our city. So we started doing some prayer walking. One of our teammates got an inspiration to develop this little pamphlet and a video to go along with it, where we had 10 prayer stations around our city. Wow! That anyone coming to our city or even from afar could watch or read through and pray for what was going on. Wow. To ask for reconciliation in the community, to ask for the growth of the church and the establishment of elders. Right. Many different topics, and all based on the history of our city. Yeah. We live in a very historical city. So that was a lot of fun. We started to do that. We started to invite groups to come through and just pray. Before that, we had all felt that there was a fairly heavy level of just kind of heaviness over our city, kind of a bit of darkness. We were kind of coming out of a wartime here in Lebanon. And as people started to come and pray, about a year into that, some of the new groups that showed up were just starting to tell us, you know what? It feels like there is a lightness about this city. Wow! It feels like there's an open heaven. And as we reflected on that, we really thought that was the result of that focus on those early days of prayer and the prayer walk. So that was a wonderful start. About that time, we got some new teammates, and these teammates went to an event called Groundwork. which is a kind of multi-organizational prayer meeting that happens in the Muslim world, where people come together to pray for the Muslim world. So most of the time, there's a lot of workers in the Muslim world that come to this to pray for their countries, to pray for the big things to change. Well, these teammates attended this first groundwork. They came back and said, we've got some ideas for going further in prayer.
Wow.
They said, why don't we set aside an evening a week, 2 hours. We'll have some worship. We'll spend some time listening to the Father for what He wants to do. And then we will pray along the themes that He gives us. So it wasn't just praying for this person or praying for this need, but it was asking God, what are the strategic things that you need to do and you want us to do and pray for that are going to change the nation, that are going to bring millions into the kingdom, that are going to transform communities. And so we simply started that. We set aside a Tuesday night and took turns leading worship, took turns leading the prayer time, and we prayed about many different things. Well, the neat thing was we up to that point in our ministry, we had only had an individual here, an individual there begin to follow Jesus. And we were there as a church planting team, but hadn't seen any movement. We had a few believers, and then we tried to get them together. That didn't work out. So we were just kind of not there. Well, about the time we started this extraordinary prayer, just that extra 2 hours.
I like that word.
It's a beautiful extraordinary. Take what's ordinary and take that next step.
Exactly.
When we started,
can I use that?
Please use that. That's not trademarked for sure. But so we started that night of extraordinary prayer, and that was the point where this young man, a refugee that we had known for almost 7 years at that point, called me up in the middle of the night. Not in the middle of the night. He called me up one evening. And he said, "Danny, I'd like to talk to you." And I said, "Okay, great." So I met him at a cafe, and we'd known this guy for 7 years. He didn't have any interest all these years in Jesus or the kingdom, but he kept coming around, and we would do different English activities and help him out. But this night he called me up and he said, I'd really like to talk to you about following Jesus.
Wow.
I've walked with you guys. I've known you. I've heard what you've shared with me. And I'm at a point where I want to follow Jesus like you do. And I just mentioned him because he that night began this journey for him. And very quickly, after spending a good number of hours at the cafe with myself, another teammate, this young guy decided to give his life to Jesus. The neat thing was he started to invite friends to hang out at the cafe and talk about Jesus. And then at some point, a few months into that, they decided to start their own Bible study, just them at his house. And we weren't involved in that. And that Bible study kind of ebbed and waned and came and went. But we were starting to pray at that point. So we started to ask God, can you multiply his group into other groups? We didn't have any idea about discipleship-making movements. But we just wanted to see things multiply. If it was add, that was okay, but multiply. We started praying as a team, Lord, we know a handful of people. Would you give us 7 believers this next year? That was our first kind of new season prayer. 7 new believers that are just really on fire, that really want the kingdom and are ready to give it away. And one of our teammates said, "Well, I'll pray for 7, but I'm going to pray for 7 to the power of 7."
Exactly.
So that was our next step. In that prayer time, we started to ask that to happen, and actually that. Within a few months, there were actually 12 new believers through that group. 12. You
prayed for 7 for the year.
We started praying for 7 for the year, and just a few months. Well, and the 2006 war that kind of seemed to rip everything apart. But afterwards, made this community stronger than it had been. This little group started to grow. And we were encouraged to pray more. And we said, this isn't enough. We want to see a movement happen among this refugee population. So we started doing that. And some of these first believers were baptized. They were meeting. We were praying for them. One night, about a year and a half after the war, we get a text from our brother, and he says, I've been invited to share in this gathering. There was a Israel-Gaza conflict going on in the region, and he was invited to share at this hate rally. But God had given him a different message, he said.
Different message.
And so he said, pray for me. So he knew we were a community that could pray and cover him, and he knew that God was getting that. Well, in that prayer, in that night, that he shared a little bit of his journey in finding forgiveness in Jesus and finding a change of heart.
Yeah.
And he was approached by two younger mosque teachers, imams or sheikhs like we call them, who wanted to know more.
Wow.
And he started a Bible study with them. Halfway through the book of Luke, they came to him and said, we've read to the end of the book, and we believe everything this says about Jesus, and we want to follow him like you. So these guys have started, they're the core of this growing network in our part of the country. There's nearly 70 groups.
70 groups.
70 groups of about 6 to 8 people.
Wow.
Meeting from house to house, breaking bread,
That's
loving
awesome.
Jesus, telling others. I wanted to mention that part of the process. They not too long ago, about 3 years ago, they asked, what is there more that we could do with prayer? They came to us and they wanted to grow in prayer as well, because they knew we were a praying community.
Yeah.
And so one of our teammates just did a simple study with them about what strategic prayer was about, and encouraged them to figure out how they wanted to do it. But here's the principles. Well, these brothers decided that they were going to set aside part of their Friday time when they meet, and they started with this one special day. They were just going to have a strategic prayer day.
Yeah.
All of them fasted to some extent before the time.
Yeah.
Asked God for for verses, for themes they should be praying for. And when they came together, they took 15 minutes of complete silence, waiting on God. And then they shared in what they sensed God was telling them to pray for, as these Muslim background brothers. There were a couple crazy things that came out. One of them said, I believe we're to pray for reconciliation between the two major political groups in our movement.
Wow.
And that was huge. It's never happened before. And another one said, we're supposed to pray for the leaders of every terrorist group across the Middle East to encounter Jesus and to lead their followers into the kingdom. I was like, for the first time together, these were big strategic prayers. I think they caught it.
Wow.
But I think it also reflected they were growing in their faith.
That's exactly right.
Well, wouldn't you know it, 2 months after this first prayer time, these two political groups had their first reconciliation.
Wow.
And our brothers just came to us and said, look, God led us to pray for that, and He did it.
And He did it.
He did it. They were so excited.
Wow.
And then about 6 to 8 months later, one of the leaders in the group, who was a doctor, ended up treating the daughter of this extremist fighter who had been fighting in neighboring Syria.
Yeah.
Everyone knew he was a fighter for one of the groups.
Yeah.
And in the process of treating her and giving that appointment for free, he was able to share his story with this man, which intrigued this long-bearded fighter to want to study about Jesus. And a few months into it, this long-bearded fighter said, what I'm learning about Jesus is starting to meet some of this fiery passion in my soul. And so this guy ended up beginning to follow Jesus, and is now leading 7 other groups of brother band extremist fighters in studies about Jesus.
Goodness gracious.
They are living for Jesus and starting to change great.
Awesome.
So, it started on our little step of extraordinary prayer, and now it's being carried on by this growing movement of Muslim background believers. And we're sold. There's more I could share, but I think that's some of the meat of it.
Started with prayer.
Started with
prayer.
That's right.
Well, Dennis, thank you for sharing. And it was an inspiration for me. And I believe everyone that will hear this, it will be an inspiration to them. So the Global Net is all about prayer and intimacy with God. So we'll be praying for you and your family and your work here.
Okay.
God bless you.
Thank you.
Okay.
I would love to.